Ladies and gentlemen, if I could interrupt your conversations and start the proceedings. First of all, my name's Bernie Curran. I'm here as MC for this evening and in my role as patron of the Newcastle Institute. First of all, I'd like to pay my respects on our behalf to the ancestors of the Awabakal tribe and to the spirits of those who are the guardians of the land where we meet. Secondly, I'd like to welcome all of you and thank you to coming along for this very special event. Essentially, it's an opportunity to meet the candidates, to hear the candidates, an opportunity for them to share their thoughts, their hopes and their ideas with you. I welcome the candidates and I wish them all the best in their presentations and in their campaigns. You will meet them individually when we come to the interview session. I also want to acknowledge the Hunter Business Chamber, especially Kristen Keegan, Georgia Collison, who played a significant part in the organisation and sponsorship for the event. I also want to thank Newcastle Herald, who's also made a great contribution for the support and in their recognition, and also in providing or helping with the services of Bar TV down the back under the leadership of the mighty Josh, who has this great capacity to take what's happening in this room, one of the marvels of technology, that we will be streamed live to the world, and the world will be watching us eagerly on every word and every footstep we're going out there. This man puts Doctor Who in the shade. From the New Institute, I want to thank Ross Kerridge, Robin Considine and the team for their work, for playing their part, and especially in the part the New Institute and the Newcastle Herald have played in garnering the questions. You know that we've gone public and we've asked people to send in their questions to the websites. These have been collected through the Herald, and this was part of the process of tapping into the public of both electorates that we've done these forums in, and these questions were taken to a group of panellists last Monday. Delighted these panellists were drawn from different sections of the community, and we've took the very serious, the range of questions. It was a marvellous range from the whole examination of the political process and all of the issues that we've been through over the last couple of years, through to the particular issues that we have been experiencing in both electorates. And so it was the responsibility to select and sort of weave these questions together in such a way that the interviewer, Garth Russell, could give them in order of importance and relevance to this particular election. So I also do want to thank Garth Russell for taking on the role of interviewer. It's a very responsible job. He is an experienced radio journalist. He had a long experience with the ABC. He's well known in Newcastle, and he does know this community well. So he's the right person at this particular time when we know how many questions we're asking about the political process and how much we want to see a restoration of the political process and proper process in place. So thank you very much, Garth.
Thanks very much. We're just getting our paperwork in order. Look, it's a pleasure to be here. There's a certain amount of responsibility, obviously, to be fair under these circumstances. I did mention to the people that turned up at the forum at Charlestown last night that even though it's been a while since I've worked at the ABC full time, I still have the chip, the unbiased chip, well and truly embedded. So I'll certainly be calling on that experience tonight as well. How this will work tonight is we've drawn very democratically the order of appearance of our 8 candidates tonight, and each will come up in order to first of all do a 2-minute presentation for you. Straight after that presentation, I will then conduct a 4-minute interview with each of the candidates in that order, and then we'll go back through the order again once the candidates have had their interview, and they will wrap up, give you a 50 or a 60-second wrap up. So that's basically how it works. There's a lot to take in. There are, as Bernie said, an awful lot of questions that were put, some really good questions that were put to the candidates, and I will do my utmost to put the relevant questions. Probably the best way, and we did it last night, is to make those questions as relevant to their 2-minute presentation as possible. As you would imagine, 4 minutes goes pretty quickly, and I invite each of the candidates to answer those questions as quickly or as slowly as they want in order to get as much across in that 4 minutes as possible. I wanted to read an example of one of the questions. It was probably more a comment than anything else. There was a fair bit of there was a little bit of flippancy in some of the questions, which obviously we cut out. There was one person wanting to complain about the price of Tui's Old and wondering whether one of the candidates could do something about that. That didn't make the grade, as you'd imagine. So we're talking, much higher than that. This one came across about what this person wants in a candidate. I want accountability, I want honesty, I want integrity, I want someone from my area representing me in government. I want them to have only the best interests of the area in their plans and discussions. We need an honest politician. Good luck finding one, and I guess you can understand under recent circumstances, as the saying goes, how do you know when a politician is lying? They're moving their lips. Well, we'll leave for you to decide who you listen to, who you trust, who you want to vote for, and that's your call, of course, and we'll make it as easy as possible tonight for you to make that call between now and 7 o'clock. So, first of all, first out of the barrel, literally, I'd like to welcome up to give her 2-minute presentation, Jacqueline Haynes.
Thank you. I'm Jacqueline Haynes. First of all, I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present. I think you can quite safely say that everyone that's sitting up here on this panel, they love Newcastle, they think that we need to diversify our economy, and that youth is an integral part of this diversification. And we are very attuned that we have a railway line in Newcastle. So how do you start telling us apart? In my opinion, Newcastle, and Australia for that fact, is missing visionary, innovative leadership, the thought leaders. And I've led the way with electoral funding reform without waiting for legislation. But how do you take this innovative way of thinking and capitalise on that further? So stay with me for a moment, and we're going to walk through an example that bridges levels of government and also shows vision. There's a company in New Zealand, and they have a technology that converts greenhouse gases to a biofuel. So that's a very powerful statement for 2 reasons. The first is that it's first biofuel that doesn't compete with a food source, and the second is that it revolutionises the way that we start thinking about carbon. We're no longer treating it as a liability, treating it as an opportunity. So this company has then partnered with another company from Sweden, who they then convert that biofuel into an aviation fuel. And this is where things start actually getting interesting, because Virgin Atlantic has now joined this partnership, and they've pledged to use this aviation fuel for all of their flights. So, in short, the Hunter could stand as a unified voice. They could use carbon as an opportunity, and they could secure Newcastle as the base for Virgin Atlantic in Australia. We could, in one project, increase our tourism many times over, increase our industrial base, and most of all, decrease our greenhouse gases. All Newcastle needs to thrive is innovative, visionary thought leaders that have the ability to collaborate. Thank you.
Jacqueline, I'll get you to make sure my mic's on. I'll get you to stay here. There was a lot made and a lot of concern about things like about the economy when it comes to this region. When we look at tourism, we look at mining, we look at technology. It seems to me that obviously technology is an area that you're concerned about. Can you give us a bit more of an insight into what you would like to see happen in this region, not just Newcastle but the Hunter?
Okay. Well, it's not just technology that I'm concerned about. It's our economy as a whole. It's diversifying that industry base. I believe that we have everything at our fingertips to make a difference in the Hunter within our borders. One of the big areas where we fall down, and so does all of Australia, we don't capitalise our research and development. So we have huge amounts of potential through HMI, university, etc., but we don't take that all the way through to commercialisation. So that means that a lot of our manufacturers are sitting out there with huge potential to take on these projects, and we still have the potential to make things. So in Australia, in the world, manufacturing is a very important part to a country's economy. There's a multiplying effect from the dollar that is spent in manufacturing. So every dollar that you spend translates to around about $1.84 out to the community, whereas with service, a dollar translates to around about 74 cents.
As far as attracting business, is there an area of business that you're particularly focused on?
No, when we look at attracting business, that is where we can start focusing on the urban renewal projects. There is a huge potential to look at those projects past a 3 to 4 year economic gain, and to encourage decentralisation of Sydney government, which is happening and moving out to Parramatta, but we haven't been part of that. We did put in a submission, but we didn't make the cut. It's also looking at how do you project out what your high quality office space is that you need, and how many of these high-end businesses do we need to bring in to the city, and start creating a map. It's really around placing together an economic plan or an economic strategy for the whole of the Hunter, and everyone working together with it.
I put it to the candidates yesterday, and it certainly applies today as well to the candidates for the seat of Newcastle. Working with the government of the time, this is an interesting time in the electoral cycle, obviously. You've obviously thought about that. How would you imagine, if you got in, how would you hit the ground running, and how would you tackle the next 5 months?
Well, it's very interesting because there's always a misconception about what an independent can do. Independents are actually very flexible players to have in Parliament. They are the people that can talk to government no matter who is in government. They can bring all different sides to the table. They have the ability to have a look at a bill that may have been put forward by the Christian Democrats or the Greens or Labor or whoever it may be, and they can stand back and they can make a choice on the way they're going to vote that would be best for Newcastle.
The hot topic, of course, in this electorate is the urban renewal of Newcastle and the CBD. Do you have a view on that?
I think all of Newcastle has a view on that. Yes, I would choose to progress those projects because I believe that there's been certain decisions made at a state level, and no member of Newcastle is going to be able to make change those decisions. When you're a member, you are not a power broker, you are merely a facilitator, and to gain the best outcomes, you are best to shape it.
Jacqueline Haynes, thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome Brian Clare to the dais to give his 2-minute presentation. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Ross. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm going to talk about the bread and butter issues because they're the things that are affecting all of us. Now, the ugly word privatisation is going on around the state. They seem to want to privatise everything, particularly the energy items that service electricity, gas, water. They're talking about putting up prices. The minute you privatise, the costs go out to buggery, and it means we're all paying a lot more than we need to. There is a way they can get around that. The government can buy bonds or sell bonds to the public and pay an interest rate, say, 6% better than the term deposit rate, and that way they don't have to, and they raise funds for their development infrastructure projects. But there's no reason at all why they should privatise these areas where all of us suffer because of price increases and we have no control over it. So it's something you should think about. There is an alternative, and it's about time they did something about it. I'll come to the railway line, closure of the railway line. My attitude is that it should be kept. To pull down heavy infrastructure like that was built by the forefathers for a very good reason, and then just to pull it down because some people want to build over the line, some people want this, some people want that, some people want better sighting down and having the landscaping down to honeysuckle. Many good reasons. But the thing is, you don't blatantly, like the Premier has done, dictate to us. They don't come and talk to us. They dictate. They say that line will close on the 26th of December, whether you like it or not. And by the way, we've got no alternatives in line. Do you want? Is that what you want, ladies and gentlemen? You want to be caught? You want to be caught short? No, it's no good. And all I say to the Premier is, butt out. Don't go ahead with this change at the moment. Stop the decision to pull the line up the 26th of December and come back, and after the next March elections, come and talk to us all then and sit down with us and find out what is best for the area and how best we can provide, if that railway has to go, what type of alternative transport we've got that doesn't leave people short and without difficulty getting to work. A lot of people come in from the Hunter Valley. They come from south. They've got to get with this proposal, they're going to get off the train at, let's say, Hamilton. Are we going to have special buses that meet them to bring them in? Or are we going to bring trams back into Newcastle that service the electorate in 3 areas? And the trams also run down Hunter Street, up to the fort, down Honeysuckle and around. So we've got this business for tourists, which would be a great idea. Trams operate well in Melbourne. Melbourne's the only place that didn't take them out in Australia. You had them taken away from you here in Newcastle, and we had them removed in Sydney because God King Carr took over.
Okay,
and you know what the problems are with that.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Brian. Claire, let's follow up on some of the points you made. Very strong on anti-privatisation, so I don't have to ask you what you think about the electricity sell-off, but when you look at the development that you see needs to go ahead in Newcastle, what sort of development are we looking at?
Well, in my travels, I've seen a lot of premises that are pretty dilapidated, particularly down the end of Scott Street and out up in the hill. And I find that people should be encouraged to modernise, to upgrade their premises, because some are looking pretty bad, and I think council really should put a dismissal notice on them to get rid of them, because they're such a bad sight to see. But I'm in favour of urban regeneration, really am, and there's a lot that can be done. And modernising housing is one part of it. I think, for instance, over at Wickham, there's a lot of industry there. I think the industry, in a way, should be pushed further up towards Mayfield into industrial parks, and that's become prime housing area. It's hard to do because people have a lifestyle there, but it's one way of modernising the area and giving it a new feeling.
People have been interested to know what the candidates' attitudes are to the economy in the CBD itself, as far as the I guess the nighttime economy, as far as the CBD generally flourishing. What are your thoughts coming back into the centre?
Well, the general feeling is that the city centre is dead at night time. There's not much doing. You walk down Hunter Street and there's a lot of old buildings. There's no systemic design or anything like that. There could be room for a lot of modernisation there. I feel the best way would be to put high-rise, but limited to 10 stories along there, but space so you don't have the canyon effect between buildings. And secondly, of course, well, I'll leave it at that.
And on that subject, people are interested to know about the concept of once again with the nightlife, boutique bars in the CBD. Obviously, there's been success in as far as the lockouts with the larger venues, but what about the nightlife and the idea of boutique bars?
Yes, well, I think they have a very salient point there. They are being penalised because they're subject to the same laws that are applying to the hotels and the big venues where most of the fights and the misbehaviour occurs. I've got to tell you that one of the reasons is that the RSA law is not being exercised in these places, but it's very difficult to do so. That's the responsible service of alcohol. It's very difficult for a barman to look you in the eyes and say, try and arrive at a decision whether you're inebriated or not, should he serve you anymore. So in those areas we're getting the violence and things like that. Now there's the Accord running up here, which Tony Brown was responsible for get going, and it seems to be working well. But these other people are being penalised in that their venues are much quieter and much well-behaved patrons, and they need to have some scope to improve their trade and keep people going to a later hour.
And finally, as I'll probably put to everyone, the election cycle, what's your attitude to the next 5 months between now and the general election?
Well, it's not actually 5 months when you get elected, because the writs don't close to the end of November. So whoever gets elected may sit for about half a month to the middle of December till Parliament breaks up. Then you go back at the end of January, and you only sit it during February, and Parliament's prorogued for the election. So you see, it's a very difficult ask. But if it's an independent, you sit on the crossbenches anyway, and as it was said earlier, you're not in a position to really influence the Parliament to a great degree. But what has happened is all the stigma that is applying to the Parliament, to the major parties, for all the rorts and misbehaviour that's gone on, the level of acceptance and trust of politicians is down there below the real estate agents. So
we'll have to,
I think I've answered your question.
I'm not stopping you because of what you're saying, but I'm stopping you because of timing. Thank you very much, Brian Clare. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross.
Our number 3 speaker tonight is Milton Kane. Please welcome Milton for his 2-minute presentation.
Hi. One would think that leaders of a community would be fully on board with honesty, integrity and accountability. We're here today because they were not. It's as simple as that. When you deal with public policy, the most important thing you've got to do is think about whom is the most vulnerable. Who are you going to hurt the most? As a wheelchair taxi driver, I know some vulnerable people. A lot of them catch the train in their wheelchairs and they get on at Newcastle station. Those who want to remove that line, do you want to go and tell those guys, sorry, you can't do it. The government has yet to decide whether they're going to use low floor or coaches. It's a contractual state transit service. Sorry, Newcastle rail service or the rail service. It's a contractual arrangement. Because it's contractual, they won't know exactly what's going to happen. On a bus, 2 wheelchairs. On a train, in each carriage, you can get at least 7. So we've got a bit of a problem, haven't we? Those wheelchair people do need a right to travel. When, as I say, in every policy decision you make, you must think of whom is the most vulnerable, no matter what. Obviously, I'm about keeping the rail for lots of reasons. I'm also about making sure our transport work. You'll notice this week that the Labor Party released a policy about the rail. It looks strangely familiar to a 2007 one that I put out. Very familiar. I think I may have had something to do with it, but there was no acknowledgement given to me. The other thing that's important is that we need to make sure the buses meet the trains. Every Transport Minister since 1985 was asked by me to please get the buses that go down Brunker Road or over the railway bridge, they're coming into town from Lambton Road, to stop at Broadmeadow Station. They can't do it.
All right, Milton, I'm going to, I'll pick you up on that because we've had our 2 minutes, but let's talk about any alternative to the way the rail line is now. We've had people ask about tunnels. We've had people ask about more crossings, obviously. A lot has been made of that. What would be your vision for an adjustment to what we've got there now?
Well, very simply, as my full program is outlined, is that we actually use a European model where you actually do a conversion on the train. The train actually runs a bit slow. It runs at around about 35 kilometres an hour. It has a electromagnetic track brake on it, so it can stop quickly. Has also the warning lights and all that stuff. So in fact, what you have is you can get rid of all the boom gates, which helps the traffic flow. We need to make a few changes to some of those roads. Whoever designed Wharf Road intersection, the Honeysuckle Drive intersection, they were fools, total fools. They should be designed far better than that. I can do that quite easily. The other thing is that because you've got a slower train, no boom gates, what you can do is you'll be operating some of those can be on giveaway signs, some on others, because the train in tram mode can stop very quickly. You can also open up all those roads. The Derby Street, you've got Worth Place, you've got Steel Street. They can be opened up. And the other thing is that all of the fencing there can be taken away. It doesn't need to be there, except up where the stabling occurs up near Newcastle Station. And we could also extend that with tram services. You can go to my webpage and you'll see all the details on that.
Questions also about the cycleway, the Newcastle Cycleways plan. Where do cycles come into the movement of people in the CBD in your mind?
I wish I had time to cycle. I just don't. Unfortunately, I'm a very busy man. I think that the cycleways are very good things to do. I have many friends who use cycles a lot. I wish I had the time to do it because I think they're wonderful things to do. We should be making sure that they're intelligent ones. But one of the things that we've got to be careful that we don't actually steal, like they did in Sydney, steal half of the road and actually make the traffic problems as well. So we've got to have them separate. With the train in the mode that I'm suggesting, in a tram-train mode, you can quite easily be running a cycleway alongside of the train. It wouldn't be a problem at all.
And just very quickly, as I will ask people, the electoral cycle, where do you see, speaking of cycles, how do you observe this time between now and next March?
Well, I guess I'm in a more fortunate position than most, simply because in the upper house, the balance of power, if in fact you have the Christian Democrats, the two Christian Democrat members, if they do not vote with the government don't get the vote. It's as simple as that. And of course, as you know, I have delivered the chairman for the inquiry into the rail. I've delivered that, Fred Nile. I spoke to him, I explained to him, I've taken people there to explain the difficulties associated with it so he could see where there was problems. And also the proposed plans of potentially buildings on the rail line and all those sorts of things which we have taken to him. So, yeah, I think that I'm in a good position because of that.
Okay, Milton Kane, thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker to the dais with her 2-minute presentation is Karen Howard.
Thank you, Garth. My name's Karen Howard, and I will be the voice of Newcastle, the voice that gives government reason to invest in our city. I will ferociously hold the Premier to account for the revitalisation of our CBD. A Labor state member won't be able to do that. The change is on, and let's get behind it. We're on our way to being one of Southeast Asia's top regional cities. I will fight for a light rail network into the suburbs, to the Mater Hospital, Hunter Stadium and the beaches. Adamstown Gates congestion will be solved via the Fassifern to Hexham freight rail link. Disrupting people with underbridges or overbridges is a bad joke. Safe cycleways and park and ride areas are sensible ways to keep cars out of our city. I'll work with the New South Wales Government and Newcastle Council on both. A heavy rail corridor will be a green open oasis, open to families and workers with pop-up cafes, artist quarters and cycleways. In the digital economy space, many self-made business people have worthy ideas and they can employ more people. I'll work with the federal government to give our SMEs the edge. The container terminal was a lost opportunity for our city. I can't right the wrongs of a Labor past, but I will demand a review for the container terminal here in the light of the performance of the Port Kembla terminal. The way to improve our spiralling youth mental health issues is to educate from a young age and provide our young people with the dignity of work, and I'll take that on. I'll support sensible infrastructure like the Memorial Walk and the Coastline's Bathers Way. I've never belonged to a political party. I do have an abiding passion for this city, and I'm determined we realise Newcastle's potential and we never again be taken for granted.
Thank you, Karen. Just to follow up on some of that, well, I've got a very long question here, and I'll truncate the question if you'll excuse the pun. But it doesn't ask you to answer you've given us your take on the rail line. Do you have a plan to attract more commercial government departments to Newcastle, which will create more jobs and demand for office space? And do you have an opinion on anything other than the rail line and the art gallery? But I guess getting back to attracting business, attracting both government and commercial business, what's your vision?
Thank you. It's a nice segue to my views on building heights. I believe that the best place for higher buildings in Newcastle is in the west end of the city. The construction of an interchange in that area will enable more growth and more development in that area. And obviously, if we're going to talk about bringing in bulk government departments, they need to be accommodated in something more than a 3 or 4 story building, and the west of the city is the perfect place for it.
As far as public transport, that's come up over and over again in these questions for very good reason, and that also plays into development, into getting people moving around the CBD. What's your platform on public transport?
Yeah, look, on public transport, 2 weeks ago I met with a group of inner city residents, average age of about 75, and I'm sure none of them would be offended by me saying that. I was quite surprised at their acceptance of the new transport system that's going to come into the city and what we agreed completely on. So they had put the needs of the city before their own needs to travel around. What I'm really upset about on their behalf is the fact that there are yet no transport transitional arrangements in place for them to travel around post-Boxing Day. It's not good enough. I've also, I took up their cause and I wrote to the Premier and the Transport Minister posing that question quite sincerely on their behalf and urging for a response. I received an acknowledgement. I've also received a letter back from the Minister for Transport saying that we will receive that information soon. Again, I don't believe it's good enough, and I'll continue to urge for a better response.
The notion of working with a major party, what do you envisage your way of doing that, basically?
So I've worked in areas of both major parties in the past. I was appointed to the board of Hunter Development Corporation by the then Minister for the Hunter and Member for Newcastle, Jodie McKay. I was reappointed to that board by the Liberal government. One of the things that really worry me at the moment, without any real political representation in our city, is that we have people in our communities with nobody advocating for them in Parliament. We have people with social housing needs and no one is taking up their cause at this point in time. And if there's one thing that keeps me awake at night, it's got nothing to do with transport, art galleries or anything else. It's the fact that we have people out there with nobody to turn to and no one to help them.
And your take on, I've just got a statement here, giving locals more power to veto projects. I guess that is making sure people have a voice as far as how far development goes in this city.
I spoke at the Property Council meeting last Friday on some of those issues. One of the things that worry me about our current planning framework is the lack of trust that the community have in that framework. Whether that's right, wrong or indifferent, it's how a lot of people feel and we should all be concerned about it. I've urged for a formal review of the planning frameworks, and I would like to hope that the community will get on board with that.
Okay. Karen Howard, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the dais for her 2-minute presentation, Jennifer Stefanak.
Thank you. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Awabakal and Warramai peoples, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present. My name is Jennifer Stefanak. I am also of Aboriginal descent, originally born in Wellington, Wiradjuri Nation, and I'm also the Palmer United independent candidate for the seat of Newcastle. I have a strong working background in the public sector as a child protection caseworker and as an Aboriginal student liaison officer for the New South Wales Department of Family and Community Services and for the New South Wales Department of Education, respectively. My passion is for people, and politics, I have found as a public servant, is the only avenue that you can really see and ensure that you have some change. I would like to also say that with my training and background that I do have an understanding of community needs to deliver better results for the people of Newcastle. A few of these areas include marginalised families, mental health, and those at risk of becoming homeless, and also the Aboriginal communities here. Newcastle is the gateway to the Hunter region by air, rail, road and sea. It needs a strong, creative and visionary leadership to ensure that it remains as such. And as it continues to grow in a positive manner, which is what we all want, that will enhance the city and its projected population growth. More services are needed for men, especially young male adolescents, as this is a major service gap in particular, and it's due to lots of family breakdown. I aim to build upon the many decades of investment and planning to utilise the existing infrastructure and resources to ensure that Newcastle is well connected and livable. I have seen the disadvantage, frustration, discrimination and dysfunction that people experience at various times in their lives. We need to protect our Australian way of life and provide solutions to ensure we support the community and its well-being now and into the future. We need to invest in a clear and common sense policies to renew, revitalise and find the balance, and also to empower from within, from all the stakeholder groups.
Jennifer, we'll have to wrap it up there, and I'll pick you up on some of those points. Thank you. Jennifer Stefanak, ladies and gentlemen. Jennifer, we obviously you talked generally about the well-being of people, but there was one question that did come through quite strongly. This particular question, I would like to know what the candidates feel they could do at a state level to address the huge problem of youth unemployment in our region. I would take it that's pretty much in your area of expertise.
That's huge. There's about 32% unemployment rate. We are above the state average with our youth unemployment figures. That really needs to be addressed through doing partnerships within public and private sectors through career pathways such as traineeships, apprenticeships. If we deregulate the educational institutions, it will also give barriers for those young people to access further training. Therefore, if you don't have these basics, as I've spoken before, your home, your health, employment opportunities, how can you succeed at life? So we really need to adopt some of the forest review done by Andrew Forrest, and it is aimed at Aboriginal people, but it doesn't matter who you are, what colour you are. You can take these key drivers of change and we can apply that to Newcastle.
This question came up quite often in various forms. We want to know what disciplines, vision and loyalties to the region the candidates bring to the electorates of Newcastle, Charlestown and Swansea, funnily enough, but generally to this region, in regards to the future of mining, tourism, technology and science. So when you look at a better well-being and more jobs and a stronger economy, what of those areas do you see particularly relevant?
Well, being a history of manufacturing and mining, and we are the largest coal exporter, we need to find that balance between the quality of life and the employment opportunities that drive our economy. And so we need to work within the existing state plans and tweak them, and I will be your advocate to make sure that things like truncation isn't a barrier, an issue for people, whether or not I'm elected or not. We will protest.
And how do you view this next few months?
Very exciting. It's a real honour to be entrusted in public service. I view it as the ultimate public service position. I have worked for over 10 years in the public sector, and my goal is to see and hear from the electorate your needs, because you matter. People should be before profits.
And as far as working within the parliamentary system, how do you envisage that, should you be doing that?
As an elected official, I would like to be known as a community representative, not a politician. I have the opportunity to speak with all stakeholders groups. They are my balance, where I can then represent them, sorry Garth,
You're right.
into the different parties that are in power. And also I can explain to people that don't understand the process. That's my job as a child protection caseworker, is to explain the decision-making process, to work out how we can then move forward and get what the people want. And the other parties just need to work with us. They're supposed to represent us. So, you know, we need to have a person in the position, in the seat of Newcastle. It's so important and crucial, our area, that we need to work with them and expose anything that is not right and will impact on the people greatly. So again, it's an honour to serve people. It is the public service, and I will do that.
Okay, Jennifer Stefanak, thanks very much. Thank you. Now I'd like to call up Stephen O'Brien to the dais, please.
Socialist Alliance acknowledges the ongoing sovereignty of Aboriginal people over these lands and pays our respects to elders past and present. I'm convinced that there are just and workable alternatives to neoliberal capitalism that are based on democracy, community, well-being and cooperation that can be implemented in Newcastle. As a librarian, I'm trained to be cooperative. As a union delegate, I'm an experienced negotiator. I win some, I lose some, but I bargain hard. And I would do the same for Newcastle. Socialist Alliance councillors elected to Moreland and Fremantle councils, for example, have negotiated wins such as affordable housing and ethical investment for their communities. A socialist vision for Newcastle includes recognising that the world is fast shifting away from coal and is looking towards renewable energy sources. We believe that the Hunter can help develop the post-coal future by transitioning towards the manufacture of wind turbines, solar components, and continue building rail carriages and ferries. Public investment is crucial to this. Finally, privatisation. Newcastle has been losing 200 jobs a year from the sale of state assets and the casualisation and retrenchment of state employees. This policy, implemented by all the major parties, affects our facilities such as Stockton Hospital and our TAFE. Privatisation takes $20 million a year from our local economy. Privatisation hurts our jobs, our rights, our services. It is wrong and must end. For the strongest vote for local manufacturing and the strongest vote against privatisation, I urge you to consider a strong vote for Socialist Alliance and have a Socialist MP in Newcastle. Thank you.
Well, I don't have to ask you what your views are on infrastructure sell-offs, but I will ask you this. What is your policy on the changed plans for the revised Tower Heights in the Newcastle CBD as we're looking at development in that area? Your policy on the rail line, but something that's usually forgotten is your policy also on improving public transport. You mentioned buses and ferries. Can you give us a sense of where you stand there?
There's a number there, Garth, but I'll give it a go.
Okay.
Look, one of the key things is that we have to get people out of cars. I mean, there are cheaper, more efficient, and more cost-effective ways of moving people. Cycleways are one of those. Buses are another. Integrated transport between rail and bus is another as well. So they're part of a holistic strategy that needs to be implemented in the region, integrated, able for disabled, and with the capacity for disabled and elderly people to have fast and efficient movement around the city. One way in which we're different is we advocate free public transport. If we really want to save the planet, if we really want to cut down our emissions and have cleaner air, that's where we need to go. Get people out of cars, onto bicycles, into public transport. That'll also resolve parking issues and reduce questions such as motor vehicle accident, which are a big drain on the health of the state and the region.
Well, we'll keep on that theme. What is your reasoning? And I guess questions have been asked about free shuttle bus services, I should say, different things that have been tried to encourage people onto public transport. Have you got an opinion as to why that hasn't worked in the past?
See, part of the problem when you look at urban renewal in Newcastle is this focus or this idea that the Newcastle CBD has to relive the glory days of when it was the main retail hub. That's changed. What we really need to do in the city is change its focus towards shop-top housing and small street-level retail that is innovative, that is finely grained, and that is very geared towards the sort of success that Newcastle has been able to achieve. So that's where we really need to be going in terms of getting people into the city. Now, that's part of the reason why we haven't had, perhaps, more people using public transport in Newcastle. And I think what we do have at the moment, the free shuttle services in the city, is a fantastic initiative that should be retained. However, there's a whole lot of issues related to that. It's part of to do with the fundamental flaws in the public transport system in the region.
And I take it, well, I'll ask you, do you want to see the rail line remain as it is, or do you want to see any modifications to it?
A lot of modifications can be made to the rail line. I believe in retaining the rail line into Newcastle. Save Our Rail have put forward a whole range of very innovative and very intelligent measures that can be put in place to make the service more efficient. So one of the key things we should be able to do is live in Newcastle and have the capacity to work in Sydney. I've done that myself, and I think we really need to have that fast train service that we can get to Sydney, work there, and get back in the same day. So really that's why I think, one of the reasons why I think the rail line is so crucial to retention, but it also needs to be faster and it also needs to be more integrated into the city. But retention, sure.
Okay, I think that's our time is up.
Thank you.
Stephen O'Brien, thanks very much. Now to the dais to give his 2-minute presentation, Tim Crackenthorpe.
Thanks, Garth. Before I start, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the country that we stand on here today, the Awabakal and the Worimi people, and to any elders past and present. I've been a Labor councillor for the last 6 years. I've been a board member of the Westpac Rescue Helicopter for the last 5 years. I've got a business degree, a Masters in International Studies. I'm married to Lara, and I've got 4 young Novocastrians. To start with a story, it was 27 years ago that I won a scholarship to South Africa, where I lived for a year. This was a very formative time where I saw huge inequality and injustice under apartheid. It was then that I made a vow to myself that no matter where I lived, I would always fight for better health, education, and community outcomes. Consequently, the issues that I'm focusing on today are health, education, the environment, jobs, and a fair share of our port sale proceeds. My vision for Newcastle is for a vibrant, healthy, smart city with full employment, a city that nurtures the creativity for which we are known. This week I outlined Labor's revitalisation plan for Newcastle, and there are quite a few copies around. This plan contains $750 million from the sale of the port, construction of a much-needed convention centre and exhibition centre at Honeysuckle, major local road projects, including getting rid of the Adamstown gates and having a crossing, committing to saving Newcastle rail line and having more crossings, contributing to $14 million to the Newcastle Art Gallery redevelopment, so we finally get that catalyst project. While I'm out talking to the community, the biggest issue that people raise with me is jobs. That's their priority, and at a time when the Baird government is sending manufacturing contracts offshore, we are proposing a local weighting on manufacturing tenders to keep jobs local. At a time when the Baird government sacked 1,100 TAFE teachers across TAFE, New South Wales, I'm calling on the Premier to convene a jobs summit. On health, this government's cut $3 billion from the health budget. Our eye clinic in Newcastle was closed for 2 years. Hunter Health Counselling service has been shut, and we currently have huge blowouts in emergency waiting times at John Hunter due to the $3 billion cut. Health and education are the backbone of our policies, and over the next week I'll be announcing more commitments in the area of the environment and CBD renewal. My commitment to Newcastle is clear. If you vote for me, you'll be sharing in my vision for a vibrant, healthy, smart city that we know Newcastle can be. Thank you.
Tim, I'd like to pick up once again on youth unemployment. You mentioned TAFE, you mentioned funding cuts there. What specifically do you think is a priority when it comes to youth unemployment in this region?
Well, if you look at TAFE, this government's cut a massive amount out of TAFE. They've increased the fees. I ran into some kids the other day. Their $800 TAFE course this year will cost $14,000 next year with a HEX system. You've got kids who do leave school early in Newcastle and the Hunter. That's statistically a fact. They're not going to be able to afford to go to TAFE to get big whacking health HEX bills, and it's becoming very inaccessible. So I'm calling for a job summit. Labor's also put forward a plan whereby major contracts have to have traineeships and apprenticeships if they're got in New South Wales by major companies. So there's a couple of initiatives, Gar.
And a plan, people are asking about a plan to attract more commercial and government departments to Newcastle, creating jobs. Obviously, creating demand for office space. Is that something you'll be focusing on?
Absolutely. We saw under Tim Owen, we saw the health department move out of Newcastle CBD and go up to Charlestown. I'd certainly be fighting against any government department moving out of Newcastle. Look, we've got a lot of great A-grade office space certainly being built in the Honeysuckle area and also in Newcastle CBD. But the West End is where we're headed in terms of high-rise. The historic East End is not. But we've got certainly a very attractive office accommodation space and high quality, and we've also got some great innovative organisations, the Lunatic Society, for example, who have their awards I went to very recently where they're rewarding great biotechnology innovations. And, you know, if we become a bit of a hub for technology, I think the government will be very happy to move departments and try and attract them to Newcastle.
Well, we're talking about innovation. Technology has come up a couple of times in our questions to do with the NBN. Obviously, it's more a national issue, but what's your take on the importance and ways of rolling the NBN out more quickly in our region than it's likely to be?
Well, it actually is a very much a federal issue. However, I know that Sharon Clayton, the federal member, is fighting very hard to get that rolled out as quickly and as efficiently as possible. But that goes straight into having Newcastle as an attractive place for investors, for businesses. Fewer and fewer people want to do the big commutes to Sydney and to other places. They want to work from home. That's what the future is. We're going to have to transfer our economy as time goes on away from a coal-based economy. We've got great, the CSIRO and other great hubs here for technology. So, you know, it's a wonderful place to live. We need that sort of high-speed broadband network to make it an even better place to work.
And development, you talked about the West End. What is your specific vision for the CBD?
My specific vision is, well, I've got Labor's plan here, certainly to open up the CBD, keep the heavy rail line. You've got great Labor initiatives in there for the law courts, you've got the university campus, you've got GPT. Certainly that is the historic East End. Extensive community consultation went into the Newcastle Urban Renewal Strategy, which highlighted that area for medium density, not high rise. So in terms of the CBD, let's go ahead with GPT. They can still make it work without those two twin towers, and that's a great project for Newcastle.
All right, Tim Crackenthorpe, thank you.
Thanks, Garth.
And finally to the dais, because I welcome and invite Michael Osborne to give his 2-minute presentation.
Thanks, Garth, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. I too would like to acknowledge that we're here tonight on the traditional country of the Awabakal and Worimi people, recognise their cultural heritage and more than 200 years of dispossession and ongoing connection with the land. And when I say those words, they're not words that I've created or that is a tradition, but are words that have been developed with the Aboriginal community and the people of Newcastle to come up with a consensus of how best to acknowledge the land that we live on. And I think that's an important flavour in what I'm going to say tonight. I've been a councillor on Newcastle Council for more than 10 years now, and in that time I've tried to reach consensus with all the different factions and groupings and colours and ideas on Newcastle Council to bring them into an approach that brings all the community together. And I think in Newcastle we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do that for the state seat of Newcastle. What we've seen in the past, both Labor and Liberal, let's be honest, are representatives in Newcastle who haven't stood up for the people of Newcastle. When it comes to coal, Labor is silent. When it comes to big developers, the Liberals are silent. What we need is more inclusiveness in the community of Newcastle. When we talk about public transport, the current plan on the table will condemn Newcastle to having a third-rate public transport system cut off at the knees. We need a smarter approach that brings the whole community together, that's creative and inclusive and innovative, that revitalises Newcastle, but in a way that the people of Newcastle want. We need strategies that build on the success of Renew Newcastle. That's a homegrown example of what we can do in the city. We need policy certainty that can create the shift to the clean energy economy so that we can capitalise on those opportunities here in Newcastle. There is no point in just wishing for these things to happen. We need policy certainty and we need the strategies in Newcastle to make it happen.
Michael, I'll join you now with our 4-minute...
Oh, that went very fast.
Yes, it does. It does indeed.
I have lots more to say.
I guess people want to get a sense of the issues around the CBD, and we'll talk broader than that, but public transport is obviously an area the Greens are concerned about. Can you give us a quick vision of what you could see happening, not just for the Newcastle area, but obviously the surrounding
Excellent.
areas?
Thanks, Garth. I think it's time for a Hunter Transport Authority so that transport planning for Newcastle is done in Newcastle by Newcastle people. What that means is buses, ferries, trains, light rail, cycleways, all integrated. At the moment we have, buses turn up at railway stations after the train's left. We need to fix those things. We need to fix them in the Hunter.
As far as any changes to the rail line into Newcastle, what's the vision there?
I think the key thing is that the people of Newcastle want a clear plan and a clear strategy. Now, the best cities in the world, they have railways that go right into the city. We're lucky that we've already got that, but the current government is talking about cutting the rail line without a plan. The Wickham interchange won't work. It won't work. The transport planners have already said that. Cutting the rail line Boxing Day, just before the New Year's Eve festivities, just before the Asian Cup, It's a mad idea. There is no plan. And we need to develop that plan in Newcastle by Newcastle people.
What's your flat plan for further developing in the CBD? As far as bringing more people into the CBD?
Yep, I very much support the Newcastle Urban Renewal Strategy because that's a plan that's been developed in Newcastle in consultation with the Newcastle people. Now, that's not the change that's been imposed by Sydney just this year in terms of a state environmental planning policy coming over the top and imposing those two twin towers. That's the strategy that, for the CBD, limited the height at 8 stories, that put the major development down the West End, because West End we need to revitalise. In the city is revitalising, not because of what the state government's doing, but because what the people of Newcastle are doing.
Economically, obviously, we could do with a boost as far as technology goes. Is that something the Greens are behind?
Yep, and we're very lucky in Newcastle. We've got the university, a world-class university. We've got the CSIRO. We've got the largest solar thermal research facility in Australia in Newcastle. And we have a world-class system of technical and further education in the Hunter TAFE. Now, the state government is taking money out of the Hunter TAFE. Jobs are being lost. Course fees are going up. We're losing courses at a time when we should be investing in education so that the next generation and the current generation can transition to a clean energy economy. But that won't happen unless we have the strategy and the plan in place. Now, at Newcastle University, they're creating solar panels printed on plastic, printed on material that then could be laid out on the roof and generate electricity. Now, to commercialise that sort of innovation, we need people. We need people with the skills in Newcastle.
Very quickly, this next period, this next 5 months, how do you view it?
I'm glad you asked that. I want to develop the Newcastle strategy in the next 5 months in consultation with the people of Newcastle. Now, there's not too many things a local member can do in 5 months, but stand up for the people of Newcastle, develop a strategy, a consensus document that is the Newcastle strategy. What we want for Newcastle in 5 months, when the next election comes in March, we can have a document that we can agree on that is the Newcastle strategy.
Michael Osborne, thank you very much.
Thanks, Garth.
All right, well, you've heard the 2-minute presentation, the 4-minute interview. I'll now ask in the same order that we got people up originally, the candidates up originally, to give their closing, and you can actually do it from the table there and just pass the microphone on if you would. I'll just make sure that's working. Yes, it is. So first of all, Jacqueline Haynes. It's not working. Test 1, 2, test 1.
All right, sorry about that. Well, to sum up, you get what you vote in. So if you want to see a change, you must begin that change via the voter. We need to stop this need for instant gratification. We need to stop the being manipulated by big spending socialites. But I'm already preaching to the converted crowd because this is a crowd of politically active people. So we need to come together and bridge across our political issues and push for innovative ways to decrease the average age of participation. When I look out there, it's not that young. And wherever possible, we need to educate the voters on their rights to vote. And this is a wonderful gift that we've been given. We need to start being very loud around open governance. On the 25th of October, I'm really just begging you to go to the polls and not vote on the single issue that has monopolised our town. Start looking for a candidate with a skill set, the values that can serve you well, your family, your friends. Look for, I can offer you facilitation, project management, collaboration, honesty and integrity. So good luck.
Jacqueline Haynes, Independent, thank you very much. Brian Clare, Independent, your wrap up, please.
Yes, well, ladies and gentlemen, there are a few things I couldn't cover. I've got so many policies, but the nurses' ratio of employment is pretty bad to patients, and I think that needs to be looked at. They need to be supported. They're under a great deal of stress. Now, ladies and gentlemen, somebody mentioned the word JOB, jobs. We have this high unemployment rate amongst young people, and amongst those people that are being retrenched, their chances of getting a job are very, very difficult. That's families left floundering. I suggest to you there is an alternative, and that is that we have a work scheme funded by the federal government whereby the dole is paid over to an employer, and that person on the dole is put to that employer on a 2-year contract to get training and work experience. That gets them off their backsides and hanging around doing nothing. Their self-esteem is way down there at the bottom of the road because they just see the future as being hopeless. So the idea is to get them out there doing something positive. So if we can do that, the government pays, Centrelink pays the dole over to the employer tops it up to the basic wage.
Okay, Brian,
and the employer then pays that into the Centrelink account, and that Centrelink account then is paid to the
Thank you very much, Brian Clare. Now Milton Kane, Christian Democrat Party.
I think it's important to remember in 1935 there was a decision to build the Western Newcastle City bypass. Still not finished. That is the story of the history of the membership of the people that have represented Newcastle in action. I'm a person who's capable of doing things. I'm actually a person who comes from a farm originally in Western Australia. My father's attitude was very simple. Fix it and do it now. That's what I want to give to you. We have a plan for a T4 which will shut down the passenger services up the valley. It will actually make our health worse. There's no reason why a coal train can't be covered. They're exactly the same as a grain train. No grain trains are uncovered. There's absolutely no reason why the trapdoors on the bottom of those trains can't be sealed. More dust is coming from the underneath of those coal trains than from the top. No reason why it can't happen. We should leave some coal in the ground in case some people in 1,000 years' time might want to have a look and see what it looks like.
Okay, Milton,
we don't have to use it all today.
Thank you very much, Milton Kane. Karen Howard, Independent.
Well, whomever is successful would be smart to take up some of the great ideas that are canvassed around in forums like this, because there are certainly plenty of them. I will be the voice that gives the government reason to invest in our city. I will advocate for better connectivity to our suburbs, better mental health facilities and awareness education for our kids. I'll advocate for safer cycleways through the cities and the suburbs. We deserve a proper cultural precinct, and I'll work in a non-partisan way to ensure that outcome. We deserve a fresh start and a credible independent voice who is prepared to work with the government of the day and not beholden to any parties. I have an abiding passion for the city, and I'm determined to ensure that we are never again taken for granted. Thank you for caring and spending time with us tonight.
Thank you, Karen Howard. Jennifer Stefanak, the Palmer United Party.
Yes, thank you, Garth. The Australian Council of Social Services states that 1 in 6 children live in poverty right now. Novocastrians are tired of political rhetoric, and people here in this city need several things: integrated transport system by adding options, not truncation. People should be the priority, not profit. Privatisation is not the answer to deliver frontline public services. It should be used adjunct to services already in place. We should not sell off our electricity infrastructure or deregulate our educational institutions either. This is unequitable and will cause further disadvantage to all sectors in Newcastle. And it's very important with your vote, again, like my other friends here at the table, that we can be your voice as independents. Yes, I am the independent for Palmer United, but Clive lives up in Queensland and I live here. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Jennifer Stefanak. Stephen O'Brien, Socialist Alliance.
For 10 years, I worked in the Newcastle Steelworks, and at a certain point, I came to the realisation that this was a dying industry, and I learned a lot from that experience. And I was able to make that transition from a labourer in the steelworks to working in vocational education and training as a librarian. So I have an experience of what a transition is important. I think Newcastle is really facing that moment now. We really need to move away from King Coal and start to look towards the need to have a local, renewable-based manufacturing sector. That's where we really need to go. That's part of my vision for Newcastle. We really need to start to plan for a post-coal future. Socialist Alliance is very committed to the environment, is very committed to social justice. By voting Socialist Alliance, you're really giving voice to the need for a more equitable, just, and a future-oriented society. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen O'Brien. Now, Tim Crackenthorpe, Labor.
Thanks, Garth. A vote for me is a vote for a vibrant, healthy, smart city with high unemployment and a city that really nurtures all that wonderful creativity that Newcastle has, with the most artists per capita of any in Australia. My priorities for Newcastle are for jobs and youth employment, a fair share of our port sale proceeds, for more money into health, to stop the huge cuts to TAFE, and a focus on the environment. After I lobbied John Robertson has committed to investing $750 million from the sale of the port into revitalising Newcastle and the Hunter. Newcastle is moving ahead, and it's largely because of Labor commitments. We have got $60 million into the Hunter Stadium. We've got the Pan-Pacific Games coming here. We've got the new law courts. We've got $30 million we put into the new university campus. We've got nearly $250 million that we put into the inner city bypass, and Labor's put $65 million into the Hunter Medical Research Institution. So look, my commitment's very clear. I'm advocating for continued Labor investment in Newcastle, a historic $750 million investment in infrastructure.
All right, we'll have to wrap it up. Thanks, Tim.
More money for TAFE school education and jobs.
Tim Crackenthorpe, thank you very much. And finally, the Greens, Michael Osborne.
Thanks, Garth. This election, Newcastle has a unique opportunity. In 2011, Newcastle was put in the top 10 cities in the world to visit, and we can be there again. The sale of the port actually is a unique opportunity for Newcastle to get funds for infrastructure, not half, as is promised here. The port was built in Newcastle by Newcastle people, and we're the ones who have put up with the pollution coming from the port. We should get all of those funds for the revitalisation of Newcastle. This election is about trust. Who do you trust to work with you to stand up for your vision of what Newcastle would look like? Who do you trust who would stand up for all those issues that are important to you? How can the people of Newcastle trust Sydney politicians who talk about cutting a rail service, for example, on the promise of some future investment? With a small investment and a strategy worked together with the community, Newcastle can once again be in the top 10 cities on the planet to visit. Thank you.
Michael Osborne, thank you very much. Would you please keep those round of applause going for all our candidates? And I'd like to hand you back to our MC, Bernie Curran. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Garth. At the end of last night's forum at Charlestown, a fellow came through from the back of the crowd, came up to me and said to me, who organised this? How did we get all this? We've actually had a great night. We've listened to all of the candidates. He said, I didn't have to pay. I come here, it's all the seats are in place, everything's here. I said, well, it was the Hunter Business Chamber, it was Newcastle Herald, it was the Newcastle Institute. In this case, it's the South Newcastle Leagues Club. Simple things, but he was thrilled to actually hear what the candidates had to say and to be part of what is a basic political process and a basic political right. So I congratulate each of those organisations for bringing it about, that we had that event and that we've had this event tonight. I congratulate the candidates for the way in which they've shared their ideals, their values, their perceptions, their solutions, their strategies. This is what this night is all about. And it's been appropriate that it's been driven by the questions coming from members of the Newcastle community, and that they've been coordinated by a Novocastrian like Garth, and Novocastrians here taking on the issues. So thank you all, one and all, for the candour, for the ideas, for the inspiration. We know the environment from which we come and how much what we've been through from the political process. What's been said tonight demonstrates quite clearly there is not one part of our lives now that is not affected by the political process. There may have been time in the past when a small part or a middle part, but everything from health to education to security to our vote to our confidence to our trust to our ageing population to our children to our grandchildren, there is not one aspect of it. All of those are now affected by the decisions, even now in the last 3 weeks, our privacy, our laws. So we have much to think about as a community and as a political group. You know that most of us as Australians tend to think of politics is over there. Politics is what politicians do. Well, what we've been through over the last couple of years is similar to a series of earthquakes. An earthquake that's blown up federal parliament, blown up state parliament, because the parliaments have been reduced almost to boxing rings without referees and without rules, where whoever has got the power of the punch is able to dominate and dictate what happens. You translate that environment back and bring those people here to listen not only to the voices here, but I would love to tap into the minds of every one of you sitting here for the last hour and a half. If I could actually bring out of you what each of you have been thinking, what you've thought. But somehow that's the process that we have to go through. That's the process that we have to make ourselves political in the broadest sense of the word. That's what tonight is about. Last night I called this event the building block of democracy, the building block of the political process. That's what we've been divorced from. And the emphasis is as much on us as it is on these people. We can no longer afford to allow them to roam around in the paddock doing whatever they like. We've let them do that. We can no longer let them do that. They want our trust. They have to earn it. But we can't say, you're in the paddock, we'll go away for 4 years and come back. We've actually got to get in the paddock with them and work with them. Whether the paddock's a rugby field, a dairy farm, or whatever analogy you like, but we've all got to get into it. So thank you so much, all of you, for coming. Thank you, Garth, for all your work, all your study, all the perusing of the questions. All those people who've played a part in tonight, you must be tired. I'm sure you will enjoy a drink downstairs. Rest well tonight. Good luck to all of you people, and good luck to you, and thanks very much.